Amazing. I am so glad to be back here. It feels like only a few months ago that it was Vuejs Amsterdam last year. And we were, a lot has happened since then. We've released Nuxt 3, and we have a plan for 2023. So there's lots of exciting things coming in the Nuxt world. But today, I didn't want to just show you Nuxt from scratch. I would love to do that another time. I thought I would show you another project we've been working on called Elk, and give you a bit of a feel for what is possible with Nuxt 3 in the real world. So I should probably say who I am first. I'm Daniel. I'm Daniel Rowe. I'm on the Nuxt team. Before that, I was in agency world and then in SaaS world, building products and working with clients. And I was a user of Nuxt. I absolutely love Nuxt. And because I really believe in open source, I love receiving the amazing work of other people and using it and getting to try it out. It feels incredible, doesn't it, when someone releases something into the world and you get to try it out and actually use it yourself. And for me, a big part is I want to do that back. I want to also do whatever I can that other people can use too. I guess I'm not saying anything unique, right? We all believe in this, or a lot of us do. And so I got involved in contributing to and helping out with Nuxt. You can find out some of the projects I'm involved with there. You can find me on Twitter at Daniel C. Rowe, or on Mastodon at daniel@rowe.dev. And I'll tell you more about that in a moment. This is where I normally am. I'm normally at my desk at home, answering GitHub issues or on Discord. And one of my 3 cats is probably there. That is Lily. I can tell you that I feel it was a bit of a rescue. The people who were looking after Lily before us called her Hitler, which I felt was a very unfair characterization for such a beautiful and lovely cat. And I'll probably have a cup of coffee in my hands. So this is how Elk started. So it was probably around the time of the Nuxt 3 release. Anthony, who you'll hear from in just a moment, sent a Discord message to our little team channel saying, yeah, it would be cool if we could create a Nuxt version of Mastodon and even host our own server. A couple of days later, a repository invite appeared in my inbox, and more contributors started joining. And it really grew very quickly. Even though it was completely closed in closed beta, it absolutely exploded. We have had over 130 contributors up so far. We've had almost 2,000 commits since we started the project in November. So it really has grown very quickly. But I should probably say what Elk is. And if you're not slightly intimidated by looking in those eyes, then, well, I certainly am. So Mastodon is a new social network, a new kind of social network. So it is powered by a protocol called ActivityPub. And it's a little bit like email. So instead of having one central server where you post your tweet or update, and everyone else connects to that same server to get the data down, with Mastodon, you have the concept of following people. You let them know that you're following them, and then their server will tell your server whenever there's an update. So there's this sort of communication that's going on. And a bit like email, you can have an account on any server. It doesn't really matter where. Except when it comes maybe to the moderation policies of the server, a bit like your email server's spam detection. So Mastodon is this new movement, a new social network, and over the last year particularly, you probably will have noticed if you've been on Twitter that there have been some dubious decisions made. And for a lot of us who love Twitter, I've discovered so many cool and interesting things that people are doing on Twitter. I was really sad to see. So there are a lot of people started flocking over to Mastodon. And actually, I'll just show you what the sort of default Mastodon client looks like. It looks a little bit like this. And so this is maybe a little bit unfamiliar to people. It's a little bit confusing, perhaps. It's not quite as nice as maybe you were expecting. And so we built Elk. This is Elk. And if I don't know how the network is going to hold up in the talk, I very much hope it will do well. But Elk is a client for Mastodon, so it connects to your what's going on there? Actual live photos. I feel it connects to your Mastodon server and is a client for it. You can sign in, so I can sign in to my particular Mastodon server, and fingers crossed, that's going to sign me in. It's multi-account. You can add lots more if you want. You'll notice it has it's installable via PWA either to my computer or on my phone. And it has support for a lot of things you might like push notifications. It has support for lists. You can explore different servers. There are a lot of user interface accommodations. I can pick a different color if I want. It's localized into lots of different languages. It has some very, very nice user interface, quality of life features as well, and lots more. And basically, for those of us using it, it's been a chance to explore and play around. What if we could, in an open source world, fully customize the social media experience we have as users? So it's been, I think, super cool. Certainly, I've enjoyed it a lot. That's what Elk is. But if I can get back to my slides, I should show you a little bit about what features in Nuxt we've used to make Elk possible. Does that sound like a good idea? Before I go much further, who here has used Mastodon? I'm not expecting a huge number of people, but okay, I'm impressed. I'm really impressed. You guys are the early adopters, right? In coming days, when Mastodon rules the world, as in Paleolithic or times, whatever, you will be the beginner. You will be able to point back to this day. Okay, here's what we've done not the day of this presentation, the day you joined Mastodon. Let me be very clear about that. So we've done a couple of things. We've used Nuxt's built-in features, things like auto imports that let you use config and utilities anywhere in your project without having to explicitly import them. So TypeScript knows exactly what they are. You get full type support. You can refactor and change the original names, and they'll be updated. It's all working as you would expect. Basically, the aim is to get rid of that friction that gets in the way of you actually doing something in a project. So you can see this is a screenshot of Elk. This is very much what it's like. Everything is just fully auto-imported for you. If I were to go and pick a random component, which actually has some kind of auto-import, you'll see that I can actually access all of these kinds of things with type support. And basically, that means that it's really easy for new people to join and start working in a project. We do things like use built-in Nuxt middleware. And actually, the example there is we faced a bit of a challenge. So one of the things Elk is a client. So it doesn't actually have any data on the users who use it. It doesn't store any information about you at all. So there's no cookies or anything keeping track of people. We don't even have analytics turned on the browser, and all we know is how many people download the source files we've got. But we wanted to implement social preview, so that if someone pastes a link to a Mastodon status, then just as with Twitter or some other social network, you actually get a nice preview when you post it. So we actually implemented a little. This is the entirety of the code. It's a little plugin in Nuxt that looks at the user agent. If it's a crawler, then we forward the user agent onto the original server. So that means that magically, previews appear when you paste stuff. Social metadata just works. And this was the second attempt. The first attempt actually was fully fledged. We fetched the data ourselves. We server rendered it. And then it occurred to us that maybe this might not be the best thing to be doing with users' data on remote servers. And perhaps we should follow this privacy-sensitive approach, which defers to the privacy settings of the original server. Building Nuxt has been so much, building Elk has been so much fun though, because we've had so many contributors trying out, building new things, and stretching the boundaries of what they've needed to do. Because we've had objectives, we've needed to deliver things, and so people have been pulling in modules that they've written, and they've written new ones just to make Elk work, and actually then taken those and extracted them and published them to NPM as modules that you can use today, coming out of Elk. And this is a really nice pattern that I would highly commend if you're using Nuxt. This is a module I built very early on in the Elk development cycle. We had comments because the code was half-written and we didn't want to deploy like half-written stuff. But if you looked in the comments, you could see things that maybe revealed more than we wanted to reveal. So this is a Nuxt module called Purge Comments. And basically, it has the boilerplate, and that has a tiny little bit of a Vite plugin which inserts into the Nuxt Vite config, which simply processes the code and removes comments. It's not that exciting, let's be honest. But the fact that I could just create a file, create a module, and get on with what I was doing makes a huge difference. And we've done, so I want to commend the creator of Vite plugin, PWA, who's sadly not here today, but he created a Nuxt integration for Vite plugin PWA. Built it for Elk. We continue to explore the boundaries of what was possible, and now he's created a Nuxt integration for Vite plugin PWA, and that has been so much fun to see. So this is the Nuxt. This is the Elk project, and you see we have these different modules that we've created along the way. Things that maybe so we have a stale DAP module, which actually just checks that our PNPM lock file is up to date. We've got a module which we've created to add information about the build environment. Are we in a preview branch? Should we be displaying sort of this is a preview version, don't put any of your credentials into this app? Or should we be displaying the main branch? And so we have a little module for that. Basically, we even have, I'll say a little bit more about this in a moment, we even have a Tauri module for native app support, which does some very, very cool things. But basically, being able to do all of that in Nuxt modules is very cool. And here are a few of the modules that have been adopted in the project, and we've actually seen bug reports or fixes or feature enhancements or whatever going back upstream. And many, many, many more. You can check them out at nuxt.com modules, where you can see the integrations that already exist and maybe create your own for something that you would like to see work in Nuxt out of the box with no configuration. Now, when you deploy an app like this, I've discovered that I've been totally floored. I don't know. And I should, by the way, say that I am not the main person of Elk. I just want to actually make that clear because I realize I'm talking about it. It's actually Anthony Fu who created Elk, and other team contributors, people like Kevin and Matthias from the Vite core team, are absolutely like I'm just talking about it. That's what I'm doing. But Elk became incredibly popular, at least compared to my blog, which is not this popular. So this is just the last 30 days. It's 32 million requests hitting a serverless function, and our assets, I guess, as well. But only 200,000 of them were cached. Those are the assets. And actually, it's so few because the PWA then actually manages the requests and doesn't hit again. So the uncached requests, actual direct hits of our serverless function, were 32 million. Now that's quite a lot. And actually, you need to have something that is more granular than, yes, server render everything, or let's make it all static. Because we wanted to be able to do things like handle redirects for crawlers, but also the main app is entirely client-side rendered, and so we actually didn't want any of data to be, any Mastodon information to be rendered in the HTML. We want that to happen entirely on the client side. If you look here at the total bandwidth, there is a tiny proportion of that that wasn't cached. And here's some of how we were able to do that. This is just a tiny clip. So using Nitro in Nuxt, we can actually quite granularly define exactly what we want to happen to each part of the app, or even individual pages or endpoints. And this works no matter what platform you deploy it to. So we happen to be deploying it to Netlify. It would work equally well if you were self-hosting it in a Docker file, which we also provide for people who host Elk in in Docker containers. We can specify the routes and the sections of the app we want to be pre-rendered. We can use incremental regeneration for the parts of the apps that we want to. So for example, we want to cache the list of, this endpoint is when users are typing in a server they want to connect to, we give them a lovely little list of servers it might be they're trying to connect to make it a little bit simpler. But we don't want every single time a user types that in to have a fresh querying of our database to see how many servers there are. So we turn on stale while we validate strategy for that. And then other parts of the app, we need for our PWA to be able to set a content type for a certain path. And this is a static file. So it's not hitting the server at all, but we do need a certain content type. And there would be a lot more examples I could give you, but this is just the ones we happen to use. You can do a lot more. You can set static, for example. If I were to open our Nuxt config and look at our root rules, you could add redirects, you could proxy, you could, what else can you do? You can turn off server rendering for particular routes, you can add cause headers, you can make very, very granular cache decisions, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all extendable, so we can be as granular as we need to be for the app that we're building. So this means that the majority of what you download when you hit Elk is static, a static HTML page which we very carefully hydrate on the client. But it's not fully static, so it's a shell with rendered stuff in it, so it has a good user experience. But then a lot of other things are dynamic, the ones that we need to be. And just a quick preview, you'll want to be listening out for Puya a little bit later on, but this is all made possible by Nitro, which is the Nuxt server that we use to do this. So it is perfect. It's designed to work well in a serverless environment. So everything is dynamically imported. Any internal calls, so if you're rendering one route and you need to make a request to another route, they bypass the network layer entirely. And we're able to deploy without configuration to lots and lots of different providers. And you can write your own provider config if you see one that's not on there. Actually, we have more that are not listed there, but you can write your own provider config too. And all of those performance optimizations have combined to take the cold start of the Nuxt 3 server from 314 milliseconds, which is the bare minimum Nuxt 2 server, to, and I tested this just yesterday, 1.277 millisecond cold start for Nitro, which obviously works well in a serverless environment. So we found that to be helpful. And there's a little bit more. Now this is a hack. Okay, this is a hack. But I like hacks. I like hacks because sometimes they're a little bit cool. This is maybe a bit cool, and I have to explain why it's cool to me. We wanted to build a native client for Elk because one of the Tauri core team was interested in getting involved. And I should just say, it has been so much fun in the Elk project. Lots of people have got involved who are not Nuxt people. They're not even Vue people. People just out there who want to contribute and make a difference to their social media client. Maybe they want to make it more accessible, or they want to localize it into their language. I merged one pull request from someone via patch. They sent me a patch file and said, I don't have a GitHub account. Can you please create a pull request using this patch file? Anyone happened to anyone else yet? You probably know this all the time. It was fun. But like, it's such a wonderful wonderful thing, isn't it, when you're just collaborating with lots of different people who are good at what they do, but maybe have a really different background from you. But this core contributor from the Tauri team wanted to get involved. Tauri is amazing, by the way. It allows you to deploy native apps without bundling Chromium, and it's really fast, built in Rust. Cool. But only one problem. We had this whole server component to our app that I've just talked about. We have a server component. It stores information in the cloud, and how is that going to work in a native app? We don't want to have a central server that's serving everybody's data. We really want this to be able to run in the Tauri app. Well, Nitro is actually designed so it is not in any way dependent on Node. It can run in Cloudflare, of course, and this is almost the entirety of the code that I wrote to move the Nitro server into the browser. So we basically, if you run the native app, that you not only have your Nuxt Vue app running, you also have Nitro running in the browser, intercepting requests that would otherwise hit the network layer, rendering the response in the browser, and returning, and we even have a tiny little bit of handling if there's a location header in the response. I think that was cool, but you might say it's a hack. Anyway, I had a lot of fun making that. Here are a couple of other things that we use. Stackable contexts. So in Nuxt 3, you have the concept of an app, but we also can stack apps. So all the folders that might be special to you, like components, where you stick your components, they get auto-imported, or composables and utils folder, that you put your utility functions, they get auto-imported. All your roots of your app, all of the server endpoints and middleware, and all of your configuration. All of this is mergeable with other applications. So it's possible to get the Elk native app going simply to say, this can be an array as well, you can have a whole stack of them, to extend another application and make some changes. So add a Tauri module, and you're done. You're ready to go. So this actually makes things like a shared UI library or a base app with utilities or components or even server roots in a monorepo possible. Lots to say there. We even have different public folders that we actually overlay using a feature of Nitro to display different icons based on the environment of the app. So hopefully if you go to a preview URL, you see a slightly different shade of elk to let you know that this is not the main thing. And we wanted to make this adhere to best practices so that we can build a Docker image, which we do. We push it up to the GitHub registry. We want people to be able to download that, but then they might have a different instance that they want to connect to. They might want to not have a Cloudflare account, but connect to Planetscale or instead write to the file system. And so we use this thing in Nuxt called runtime config, where you specify you specify in a JSON object syntax. You could also put values there, but these are all keys, secret keys, and I probably best generally not to share that publicly. We even infer, using TypeScript, the environment variable you will need to override that key at runtime. And you have to be very explicit about what values are in runtime config, because we don't want to just ingest every environment variable from the system. We are very careful about what we do. But that I think was necessary to build Elk. And it's type safe when you use it as well, which is nice. KV storage was another thing we needed. We wanted to store OAuth information about all the different servers we connect to, so that every time a user connects, we don't have to initiate this afresh. But we have this in Nuxt, in Nitro, called unstorage. It's another library that we built as part of un.js. Puya is going to tell you more about it. But basically, we have lots of different drivers for many, many different sort of providers. These are the ones we currently have in Elk, but you could write lots more, and there are more in unstorage. So file system, Cloudflare, memory, Planetscale. The only provider-specific information we have in Elk is in that screenshot. Everything else can write to this in a completely provider-agnostic kind of way, so that the code base doesn't need to care about where something is stored. The only thing that needs to care about that is unstorage. And finally, we built, Anthony and I built a little library, first vtest environment Nuxt, and then now a Nuxt module called Nuxt vtest, which actually allows code to run in a Nuxt environment when you're testing it. So if this is something you were looking for, we've had to build it basically to build a test. How about that? Test. I was fully expecting that to auto-import for me. Basically, you will be able to use all the Nuxt environment that you might expect. Let's try that. In a vtest environment. So auto imports, Nuxt composables, anything that you might particularly need to care about. It runs with the power of vite hot reload, but also with the power of a Nuxt environment helping you along the way. And we had to build that as well for Elk. Visit us, elk.zone. Create your Mastodon account somewhere. and your favorite server, try join.mastodon.org to see a list, and come try it out. I'd love to see an issue or a PR from somebody. We've built lots more that I didn't even have time to talk about. Have a look at some of what's there. It's fun to explore and see all the different features that have been built. I didn't even get a chance to show you some of the really cool features, like being able to use Vite plugin inspect to click any part of the app and instantly go to the component that is responsible for rendering that bit. So if you're a new contributor, you can instantly see it. Or even StackBlitz's code flow, which has meant all kinds of people have got involved. You totally could too. This is what one person, oh, it's gone tiny. This is what one person had to say. Before writing the 600 lines of Vue for lists, I never wrote a single line of Vue before. So even if you're not familiar with Nuxt or you haven't dived into Nuxt 3 yet, give Elk a try. I would love you to contribute. If you're interested in either Elk or Nuxt, here are some links. Twitter accounts, Mastodon accounts, documentation, and Discord servers. There is lots and lots to explore. And you'll probably have your own reasons why you might want to use Nuxt or build an application like this or different. I would love to hear those too. Please don't hesitate to drop me a line on Twitter or Discord or Mastodon. If I can help you, if there's a problem you're facing with Nuxt or somewhere else, I would love to help if I can. That's all from me. That's the story of Elk so far and some of the things we've learned and used in Nuxt along the way. Thank you so much.